Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, Ins and Outs of Selling a Business. My name is kdee, President of Osage Advisors. And today we're continuing our conversation about when to expect the unexpected. As I said in our last episode, I was talking to a business owner and we were talking about, what's motivating the conversation. And it's one of our first questions. Why are you calling us about selling? What are your goals and objectives? And we talked about our process and we had a great conversation. We, probably 35, 40 minutes into it. And he asked me a very interesting question, which we started talking about on last episode was, when do I expect the unexpected? And, I thought it was one of the best questions I've ever had because the answer was at every stage of the process, right? In the last episode, we talked about before the sale, family doesn't want to take over the business, not expected. Valuations came in different than your buddy got in his business. You thought it'd be the same. Need to really understand why the valuation is different. That's unexpected, right? During the sales process, some things that pop up, you're getting your numbers in good order. And so we had talked about kind of broken into 4 buckets. Before the sale, during the sales process, and then, once you sign a letter of intent, the due diligence and closing process, and then after the sale, post-closing. So today, we're going to focus a bit on, again, I can probably talk for months on this subject, given our experience, what we've run into. As I always say, you don't know what you don't know. And there's always something underneath the table that pops up. You think you do the calculus on something based on your years of experience, but people are people. Everybody has a different personality, different emotion, buyers, sellers, and things do pop up that, need to be resolved. So what are some of the things that are unexpected? When do I expect them, right? Again, so here we are. You just went through a very, we prepared our documents. We went to market. We talked to multiple buyers. We got a number of bids, right? So we know what buyers are real and what buyers are not real from a valuation perspective. We invited a bunch of buyers in. And so we broke bread, maybe meeting and lunch, meeting and dinner, and, feeling really good about the buyer, the pool of buyers. And just before the LOI, you're sitting there. It's an emotional sale. So I'm kind of backing up a little bit here prior to getting into due diligence, but someone puts a great offer on the table and they come to meet with you and you're just like, bad vibes. I just don't feel good about this. What is expected? You may have had a Zoom call or Teams call. The numbers are good. The fit is good. I mean, from a financial perspective, from a growth perspective, from a strategic perspective, it all makes sense. And they show up at the meeting and you just, bam. It's like walking into a brick wall. You just say, no, thank you. I can't do a deal with these people. Unexpected, but expected. It happens on every deal. I can tell you today from every, 9 times out of 10, we bring multiple buyers in. And I always tell our clients when I coach them, when we talk to them before the meeting, it's like, someone's going to show up here and you're just going to look at it and you're just not going to feel right. I mean, we had a deal years ago. Great. There's 3 owners, great company. And they had one of the partners was, kind of steering the deal. His other partner was kind of, doing like the due diligence and working internally with the buy side team, making sure things are flowing. And there's a third partner who was, more on the quiet side, right? And so we had these meetings and long meeting. Buyer was high qualified, and they left. And the partner, who's kind of like a quiet person, just stood up and said, "No, I'm not doing a deal with these guys. I don't trust them." Okay, they're out. But you don't know. Unexpected that he would be so vocal about it, but his choice. He's part of the team, his business. You got to respect it. It's all about fit. right? So unexpected, but expected. It happens all the time. You're going to meet with multiple buyers. If you do it the right way through a process like Osage runs, you're gonna meet with multiple buyers so you can really get to know them and feel if the personality feel is right. So you finally choose that buyer, you sign a letter of intent. What's the first emotion you're not thinking about? Because you spent a lot of time getting to this point is, am I doing the right thing? You got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years into something. Am I doing the right thing? Is this right for me? Is it right for my family? A natural reaction. So, moving that. So that's when you really got to lean on folks like Osage and myself and talk through your concerns, your doubts, why you're feeling this. It's very natural. I mean, now it becomes real. You signed a document, non-binding, but still you agreed to a price, terms and conditions, and now the buyer's going to go into due diligence, right? And you sit back and said, wow, your 40 years flashes in front of your face, 50 years, 30, whatever it is, and you're saying, oh boy, am I doing the right thing? I didn't think I was going to feel this way, but I do. And I got to tell you, I think everybody does. And so whether or not you push forward and move forward on that because, it's the right thing for you and your family, or whether or not you get cold feet and you say, I can't go through with it. And that happens. The number 2 reason deals don't get done outside of financial is like buyer remorse, cold feet, seller remorse. You get cold feet. And I just can't do it. Or, like we talked about last episode, your son or daughter comes in and says, you know what, I think I want to buy it now. Or your partner who agreed to sell says, I don't want to sell, I'll buy you out. After you signed a letter of intent. And you've invested time, energy, and money to get to this point. I didn't expect that. It happens all the time. We've been in deals where, the party pushing the sale had some, some things in their life that kind of said, I got to do this. Some kind of crisis moment, right? And then that crisis moment passed, and we got down to the end game. This happened to be right before the LOI, and he says, I don't want to sell now. I'll buy you guys out. After all this time, right? A year planning, a year prep, getting ready. Your partner says, I'm not going to sell. Right? Or your son or daughter or your brother or sister says, you know what? I think I want to take it over. So it kind of puts a pause. I mean, that happens. Those are things within your environment, within your existence, your livelihood, that come up that you need to unexpected, right? That thing about seller cold feet is very, very common, and working through those emotionals is a big part of our job to help you navigate that. I think, as you get into the due diligence, if the things come up, no matter how well you plan, no matter how well you prepare, the buyer is going to do a very, very stringent deep dive into diligence, right? And they'll get into deep things like, margin analysis, customer concentration, which usually comes up before the LOI, but how much you're relying on the customer, your involvement, right? Is that we kind of felt that your involvement can be transitioned to somebody else down the road. But after we got through this, we recognized that we're not comfortable with you leaving the company in 6 months. We need you for 2 years. And you're like, well, you're sitting back and you're saying, now what do I do? Right? I had a plan after 6 months of selling. I was going to go whatever. I was going to be involved with my charitable organizations. I was going to spend more time with my family, travel with my spouse. And all of a sudden you realize that the buyer says, look, in order for us to do this deal, we need you for 2 years versus 6 months. You weren't expecting that. Now, there's ways of working that equation. I mean, typically they need you, meaning they don't need you chained to your desk 5 days a week coming into the office like you did prior to selling. They need your availability. Could be on your cell phone. Could be at an office. You maybe access to a computer. Availability. So there's a medium ground or a spot where you guys can meet halfway on something like that. But you didn't expect it, but it came up, and you're deep into it, and it's the right buyer, it's the right value. You just already disclosed it to your employees, possibly. You're doing this deal, maybe even your customers, and they come back and say, we really need you, right? So that could pop up. Not expected, unexpected, but it's expected. And you know yourself, you know your business, you know your involvement. You could have chosen your successor, non-family member who you've been working with for 10 years to get you to be that person. And then when the buyer comes in and meets that general manager who's now going to become the CEO or the president or whatever, they look at that person and they say they don't feel the same way you did. They don't have that comfort level. They don't have that confidence. They don't see the qualifications. We've had that happen. Where even though you have mentored somebody, brought them to speed, when they get to the table and sit with the potential buyer, they freeze. Even though we've coached them, you've coached them, they've been in multiple, they don't transition, they don't communicate. It doesn't feel right to the buyer. So I'm not going to pay you, I'm not going to bet 20, 30, 40, $50 million on this person. I don't have confidence in them. So what does that mean? You got to stay on a little bit longer, possibly, right? Or you pull a deal and you remarket. You expected you had the right person. Unexpected is the buyer says, no, we're not using this person. They may bring somebody, there's ways of working around it. Today we're really focused on, like that question, when do I expect the unexpected? These are the things that pop up. Again, we can spend weeks here talking about it. We're always trying to be proactive with our clients. And, especially manufacturing. And you think you have a clean building, right? Environmental, big concern for buyers. Buyers taking absolutely zero risk. They will never take any risk environmental because the exposure to them, likely they're a bigger company, and the exposure to them on their balance sheet is like, no, right? So you may not, so we always suggest updating your phase one. If you find something, doing a phase two, but that's cost to a business owner. We look at it as an investment in the process of selling your company because it's necessary. And if you don't know what you don't know regarding the groundwater or the soil, something around, or either internal, they do vapor tests now, you name it, right? Doesn't meet standards. So you expected that, you got a loan on your building and you've had it for 20 years and you refinanced it and whatever. And an environmental team comes in and they find there's an issue. So what does that mean? It means that you got to spend more money. You negotiate with the buyer and, who's going to pay for what? Am I getting reimbursed if we sell? There's ways to go. So that first level is X amount of money. That second level is, we got to go. We got to start drilling holes, putting in wells, monitoring them. It delays everything. And you thought the deal, you were supposed to close on December 31st. And, next thing you know, it's March 31st. You're still waiting on the environmental to be cleaned up. and you got anxious employees. You're anxious. You're stressed out because you want to get this deal done. You want to move on to the next level. You didn't expect this to happen, but it happened. So the way to obviously in this situation is to combat that, minimize that, is to could be proactive up front. We had a situation years ago where we knew there was an environmental issue. It happened before our client bought that business. It was we thought it was signed off by the state environmental protection, but apparently the person in charge of it dropped the ball, and the paperwork never got filed. Believe it or not, things happen, right? Unexpected. So we had to go through this whole gyration. We had to hire, bring in a environmental law firm, had a really good relation with the state. We got it settled and resolved. But it delayed the closing for 2.5 months. We closed on that Friday. True story. Next Monday, the buyer, who's happened to be a public company, got an unsolicited bid from someone to buy their business, right? If that happened a day early, this whole thing would have been put on hold because they're taking every resource they got to combat or fight against this unsolicited offer that they didn't want. So, again, time is never your friend. When you're closing a deal, these unexpected things come up. The goal here is to try to minimize as many as you possibly can, but things will come up. They always do. Resolving them as quickly as possible, efficiently as possible, where you're comfortable is critical. So, and then, then you get into the agreement, right? There's areas of the purchase agreement, the stock sale, right? That where you anticipated, where the buyer comes back to you. Everybody's friends, everybody's good, everybody's going great. You got the financial due diligence, everything has been checked off. You're in pretty good shape. A legal document comes in, and you get this, this voluminous purchase agreement from some big law firm that the buyer's, that's hired, and it's like crazy, right? You're looking at this. How am I going to read this? And you have, again, highly competent M&A attorney is going to help you, but you go through and you redline the heck thing is called, light it up like a Christmas tree. All these things. No. We're not agreeing to any of this, right? It's overwhelming, unexpected that you thought your deal was done. And it's like, it's not even close. You got this whole legal document to work through, and you work through it. It's going to take time, energy, and money. It's part of the process of selling, right? And you'll get to a solution that works, right? There'll be compromises. That's why we're here. We call it, we're with our clients shoulder to shoulder throughout the due diligence process. I call it the 9:00 Friday night phone call. It comes all the time. It's like, what's this mean again? Why am I doing this? How's it affect me? How's it affect my business? How's it affect my family? All these things come up unexpectedly to you. They need to be resolved. Those are a few of the things that during the due diligence and closing process. So you finally close the deal. You think you're done, but you're not done. Because there's what we call post-closing adjustments. What the heck is that? Well, you typically have a true-up period. Because when you close on a specific date, the buyer hasn't really looked at your numbers on that date. Right? You're supposed to deliver a certain amount of working capital. Your current assets, current liabilities at closing. There are true-ups. And you set up escrows for that, right? So the true-up period, 60, 90 days. And unexpected to you, the buyer comes in and looks at that one of your key customers sent back a huge order because they rejected it for quality issues. So it had to be reworked, had to be redone. And there's costs associated for that. And this is work that you delivered and shipped prior to closing. So the buyer's not going to look to pay for that. They're going to look for you to reimburse them for that out of this, post-closing, this we call working capital escrow, right? And during the true-up period, things come up. And there's safeguards around, there's guardrails around things, there's a maximum, minimum amount. There's ways of protecting you on that, but it was unexpected that this order was going to come out and be rejected It has to be reworked. It costs you, $30,000 or $40,000 to rework all these pieces, whatever it is on manufacturing or something, right? And you weren't expecting that, but it happens, right? Out of your control, unexpected. You thought everything was great, but it wasn't. Things with the earnout payments, the seller notes. I mean, we do everything we possibly can to mitigate risk and protect our clients in the language of the agreement, understanding the business that we're the buyer. We look for security interest, guarantee on the notes. What if they can't make the earnout because all of a sudden they hit the skids, the economy went to crap, and all of a sudden their lenders won't let them pay the earnout, right? Because they're broken some covenants. How do you protect against that? I mean, the buyer wants to pay you the earnout. High qualified buyers want to pay you that earnout because if they're paying you, that means you're hitting those revenue goals and profit goals post closing. Is why you have an earnout component to the deal, and they're making a seller note because you've helped out a little bit with the seller financing, so the banks feel better. You're invested, but things do come up unexpectedly. COVID hit, right? No one planned on that. And, all of a sudden some business literally froze, for a year. So earnout payments, probably were suspended. We may have worked into agreement that if they can't make the earnout payment, we now accrue interest on it. To when you pay, we get our earnout plus interest, right? Company could have gone out of business. We don't know, right? Unexpectedly, things happen that are out of your control. Our job is to work with your lawyers, work with you as the client to mitigate these risks as much as possible. You can't eliminate risk. There's risk in everything we do, right? But you can mitigate it, reduce it, limit it to a point where you're comfortable. Again, it's your decision. Our job is to do what we can to provide you with the information so you can make an informed decision on these aspects. But there's risks, unexpected risks. There's unexpected things that happen. They will come up at every phase in the engagement. How you deal with them, how you resolve them, how you move forward from them is going to lead to a successful sale that works for you and your friend and your family. Again, a successful sale that works for you and your family. I know this is a lot. So if you have any questions, again, my name's Keith D., President of Osage Advisors. Feel free to shoot me an email at kdee@osageadvisors.com with any questions, or you can pick up the phone and give me a call at 860-767-3273, extension 1001. To learn more about Osage, you can visit our website at osageadvisors.com. And if you enjoyed our podcast, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Ins and Outs of Selling a Business. Appreciate your time today. Thank you for being with us, and have a great day.